She stopped me at the square fountain. Then she said, "I've been searching for you so long." At the plaza fountain, Claire Morgan stepped into my path with my private zoning assessment already half pulled from her worn leather folio. The water hit the stone basin behind her with a steady, hollow crash, loud enough to blur the buses on Fifth Avenue and the lunch crowd moving around us. A sheet of mist drifted across the paving stones. I had a roll of architectural schematics under one arm, a city tablet in my hand, and exactly 12 minutes before I was expected at a Sterling Development site walk. She had my report, not the public summary, the private version, the one stamped for internal planning review only. That was the first wrong detail. The second was the eviction notice clipped to the front of her folio, its red municipal header bright in the sun. "Nathan Reed," she said. It was not a question. I stopped with the fountain between my back and the courthouse steps. I kept my hands visible, because people carrying documents like that usually had more than anger in them. They had a deadline. I said. Her blouse was modest, cream, buttoned high under a light beige blazer, the sleeves pushed up as if she'd been sorting files before running across town. Her dark hair moved in the wind, and one strand stuck briefly to the damp corner of her mouth before she tucked it away with the back of her wrist. "My name is Claire Morgan," she said. "I direct the East Side Arts and Healing Cooperative, the building your firm recommended for expedited demolition." The words landed cleanly. The East Side Arts and Healing Cooperative, Block 17. Parcel C, a line on my district map. An old brick building my firm had labeled as structurally unsound. The structural integrity report flagged a foundation failure, I said. I did not soften the sentence. False comfort wastes time. The city council requested a zoning overlay. My firm prepared the assessment after the inspection. It was not a foundation failure. Claire opened the folio without handing it to me. It was a localized basement leak from a broken municipal water main last winter. The inspector cited Code 4B, but our building is registered as a historical cooperative. Code 4B applies to commercial load failure, not a water breach in a non-load-bearing wall. The fountain kept striking the stone behind us. I looked down at the exposed page. Secondary engineering report. Moisture readings. Photographs of an east basement wall. A hairline fracture. No pillar displacement. No beam sag. No slab separation. A leak. Not a collapse. "Who filed the initial inspection?" I asked. Her grip tightened around the folio. "Marcus Sterling. My boss." The name changed the air. Marcus was not simply a senior partner at Sterling Development. He sat on the municipal planning board, chaired the district revitalization subcommittee, and had been pushing the East Side industrial overlay for 6 months. If the city approved the reclassification, Sterling Development could acquire the entire block at condemnation value and flip it to a private medical complex before the end of the year. Claire looked past my shoulder toward the courthouse. "The emergency inspection is in 6 days," she said. "The hearing is on the 15th. The eviction date is the 22nd. If the false 4B classification stays on file, we lose the building, my staff loses their jobs, and the families who use our clinic and arts program lose the only free space left in the district." There it was, inciting constraint, opposing leverage, deadline. My practical reason to care arrived before anything softer could. I was the senior urban planner who had signed the overlay model. If my firm had misapplied the code, then my seal had helped aim the wrecking ball. "I cannot represent you at this fountain," I said. Her expression did not change, but her fingers shifted on the folio. I expected that. "But I can verify whether my firm used the wrong code. If the code is wrong, refusing to look makes me part of the breach." She let out one careful breath. "You don't tear down the foundation to fix a leak," I said quietly. An old mentor had told me that during my first year in planning, after I recommended clearing an entire block because 3 basement walls had water damage, he made me spend a week with a flashlight, a field notebook, and a digital caliper before he let me touch another demolition recommendation. Claire's eyes lifted. "Exactly." I held out my hand, palm up, but did not take the papers. "May I review the secondary report?" She looked at my hand, then at my face. After a moment, she placed the top page on my city tablet case instead of directly into my hand. Careful. Controlled. Still protecting the originals? Good. A person who guarded documents usually understood stakes. I scanned the report. The classification error was not subtle. The cited 4B language required evidence of systemic load-bearing failure. Her engineer had labeled the issue as a 2A maintenance breach, repairable with trenching, hydraulic cement, and temporary bracing. The city clerk's stamp had overridden the secondary report without comment. That did not happen by accident. I finished my site walk in 20 minutes. I said, "Go to the cooperative. Wait for me there. I need to see the basement myself before I make any statement." "You'll come?" "I'll verify." She seemed to understand the difference. The wind pushed fountain mist across the stones again. The red eviction notice trembled against her folio clip, and she pressed it flat with 2 fingers. "I'll be there," she said. When I walked away, the sound of the fountain followed me across the square. The East Side Arts and Healing Cooperative sat on the corner of Marlow and 6th, wedged between an empty textile warehouse and a boarded-up pharmacy that Sterling had already purchased through a shell company. The building looked tired, but not dead. 3 stories of red brick, old limestone trim, wide front windows filled with children's paintings, ceramic bowls, flyers for grief counseling, legal aid clinics, and Saturday watercolor classes. The brass plate beside the front door had been polished recently enough to shine. Inside, the air smelled of clay dust, brewed coffee, and old wood. A group of teenagers sat around a long table, painting small ceramic tiles. An older man with a cane sorted donation envelopes near a bulletin board. A mother in scrubs carried a sleeping toddler through the hallway toward the clinic room. This was the part of my job the spreadsheets always flattened. Human use. Not theoretical occupancy. Not projected redevelopment value. Use. Claire stood near a drafting table in the center of the main room, one hand on a stack of city forms. She was speaking to the older man with the cane when I entered. She paused, touched his shoulder, and walked toward me. "He's here," she told him. The man looked me over in the way only older men who have survived city bureaucracy can manage. He did not smile. Claire faced me. "Basement is this way." I followed her down a narrow wooden staircase. The lower air was cooler, damp around the edges. A fluorescent utility light buzzed overhead when I flicked the switch. "Watch your step," I said before she reached the last stair. She stopped just long enough to notice I had moved first to check the landing, not to take control. Then she nodded and stepped down. The leak was in the northeast corner. A narrow line in the masonry, wet but stable, feeding a shallow pool that ran toward the floor drain. I set my tablet on an overturned plastic crate, took my high-lumen flashlight from my coat pocket, and crouched near the wall. The concrete smelled cold and mineral-heavy. I ran the beam over the adjacent pillars, then pulled the digital caliper from my field kit. Claire stood near the bottom step, folio against her chest. I glanced back. "I'm going to measure the crack and photograph the load-bearing points. I am not representing you yet. This is factual verification." "Understood. The originals stay with you." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "Thank you." I measured the fracture width at 3 points, checked the pillar bases, and wrote the readings in my field notebook. Hairline variance, moisture, no load transfer, no lateral displacement, no structural pattern consistent with 4B. Code 2A, maintenance, not demolition. Claire stayed quiet until I finished. When I stood, she had both hands around the leather folio. Her fingers remained curled even after she set it on the storage shelf, as if letting go of the paper too quickly might make the building vanish. The utility light buzzed above us. "Your secondary report is correct," I said. "The 4B classification is wrong." Her eyes closed for less than a second. She did not cry. She did not celebrate. She reached for her pen. "What do we file?" I liked that question. Not "will this be okay?" Not "can you fix it?" What do we file? "The city's automatic rejection system is tied to Sterling's macro hold," I said, opening a blank case folder on my tablet. "If we submit a standard correction, the clerk's office kicks it out again. We need an independent structural variance with photographic evidence, Code 2, A classification, and a planner's sealed statement that the issue is localized. Can you seal it? After a conflict check, she looked up. My firm represents the district overlay, I said, but your cooperative is not a competing developer. It is a private historical nonprofit defending its own parcel. If I file as an independent licensed planner after documenting the misclassification, it is not a non-compete breach. Marcus will still try to call it one. He'll come after your board seat. He was already using my seal to justify a false premise. That changes the risk calculation. Claire tucked the folio under her arm. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because the math was wrong. Because the fountain had been too loud and her hands had still trembled. Because I was tired of watching public policy become a polite word for erasure. I clicked the caliper case shut. Because you don't tear down the foundation to fix a leak. For the next 2 weeks, the cooperative became my second office. During the day, I sat at Sterling Development under glass walls and polished conference lights, listening to Marcus talk about block efficiency, redevelopment velocity, and unlockable value. He liked those phrases. They made people sound optional. At night, I sat across from Claire at the cooperative drafting table and rebuilt the record one document at a time. We mapped the original parcel line. We pulled historical registry records. We photographed the basement wall from 3 angles under consistent light. We printed Code 4B, Code 2A, the cooperative exemption clause, the inspection timeline, and every rejection stamp from the clerk's office. Claire worked like a woman who had long ago stopped believing anyone else would catch a drop deadline. Her calendar was color-coded by threat level, red for hearings, blue for filings, yellow for repair windows, green for community programs that she refused to cancel, even with eviction hanging over the building. The first evening, when I asked for the original deed, she paused at the file cabinet. I can redact the personal financial section first, I said without looking up. I only need the parcel number and ownership chain. It's not that. She pulled the drawer open. Every time someone says they're helping, they ask for the full file, disappear for 3 days, and come back with an excuse. Then I end up filing it myself at 11:58. I kept my eyes on the appeal form. I don't miss filing dates. That sounds like a personality flaw. It is one of my more useful flaws. The corner of her mouth shifted. A small laugh, not quite released. She gave me the deed. That became the first easy rhythm between us. She brought the records. I built the procedural wall. The cooperative stayed alive around us while we worked. At 6, the therapy group moved through the side room with paper cups of tea. At 7, the after-school art program ended with children washing brushes in the utility sink. At 8, Mr. Alvarez, the older man with the cane, checked every window lock with a ritual seriousness that suggested he'd been doing it for years. Claire never asked him to. He never announced it. He simply did the thing that kept the place whole. One night, a large format printer jammed during the zoning overlay map. Claire crouched at the machine with the front panel open, her sleeve slipping down over her wrist as she worked the torn paper loose. I reached for the manual. She held up one hand. Don't read me the manual yet. I was going to... I know. I paused with the booklet halfway open. She looked at the machine, then at me. Give me the blue tab from the paper drawer. I handed it over. She used it to lift a shredded corner from the roller, slid the sheet free, and shut the panel. The printer resumed with a mechanical sigh. Claire straightened, triumph lighting her face for the first time since I had met her. I used to run a copy shop in college, she said. 4 years. Nothing in municipal law scares me as much as printer rollers. That is disturbingly reasonable. The laugh came fully that time. It lasted only a second, but the drafting room changed after it. At the end of that night, I noticed she drank her coffee black when the work was bad and added 1 sugar packet after a small victory. I did not mention it. I simply placed a single sugar packet beside her mug after we found the historical registry clause that could sever her parcel from Sterling's industrial grouping. She looked down at it, then at me. You're observant. I'm a planner. That's not the same thing. It should be. She stirred the sugar in slowly, the spoon touching ceramic in a soft rhythm that, for a moment, replaced the fountain in my memory. The first true escalation came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in a Sterling conference room, reviewing waterfront metrics, when an internal memo landed in my inbox. Emergency Public Safety Inspection Advanced. Eastside Arts and Healing Cooperative. Friday, 9 a.m. 3 days earlier than the normal notice period. Filed under the same false 4B classification. Signed by Marcus Sterling. I printed the memo, folded it once, and walked out before the meeting ended. When I reached the cooperative, Claire was in the main room guiding a ceramics class. 6 teenagers sat around the long table, their hands covered in clay slip. She moved from one student to the next, patient and precise, showing a boy how to steady the base of a bowl without crushing the wall. She did not look under siege. She looked like someone keeping the room steady so no one else had to know the ceiling was shaking. The door chimed. She looked up and saw me. Her smile faded when she noticed the folded memo in my hand. What happened? I waited until the students had left. No crisis belonged in front of children who came here to breathe. Then I placed the memo on the drafting table and turned it until the deadline sat squarely between us. The inspection moved to Friday morning. The room went quiet except for the drip of a faucet in the back sink. Claire read the memo once. Then again. Friday, she said. The engineer can't certify the basement patch until next week. The emergency clause allows a temporary stabilization plan signed by a licensed urban planner if materials are on site and active mitigation has begun. She looked up. Materials? Hydraulic cement, steel bracing, moisture barrier, torque records, photographs before and after. You want to patch it ourselves? I want to stabilize the localized breach tonight, document the work, and post a Code 2A temporary compliance plan before Harris arrives. Harris? The inspector assigned to Friday. She pressed both hands flat to the table. Nathan, that is not just paperwork. If you put your planner seal on a physical stabilization opposing your own boss's demolition classification, Marcus will use it to destroy your partnership track. I lined up the memo with the edge of the table. My partnership track is not a load-bearing structure. A laugh escaped her, sharp and startled, then disappeared. I lifted my eyes to hers. This is your building, I said. You decide whether we do the repair. I can draft the plan, gather materials, and stay until it is documented, or I can help you call the engineer and request an emergency affidavit. Your choice. Claire looked toward the hallway where the teenagers had left their clay bowls drying on a shelf. Then she looked at the memo. We patch it, she said. The relief did not come from certainty. It came from motion. By 7 that evening, the basement had become a work site. I changed from my suit into a heavy gray work shirt and jeans I kept in my car for site emergencies. Claire tied her hair back, pulled on work gloves, and taped a plastic sheet across the storage shelves to protect the community supplies from dust. The basement smelled of damp concrete, graphite from her marked-up notes, and the sharp mineral bite of hydraulic cement. I mixed the cement in a bucket while she read the stabilization sequence aloud from my draft. Photograph the breach before mitigation, she said. Done. Measure crack width at top, center, and base. 0.7 millimeters, 0.9, 0.8. Clean loose material. Hand me the wire brush. She did. Not a beat late. We worked without the awkwardness of performance. She held the flashlight at the exact angle I needed. I packed the cement into the fracture and pressed until the mixture filled the line. She handed me the trowel before I asked for it, then pointed to the section of wall where the old moisture stain extended farther than the report had marked. You missed that edge, she said. I looked. She was right. I scraped the cement wider and made a new note. Good catch. I live with this wall. I'm beginning to understand that. The steel bracing took longer. The first strut refused to sit flush because the old masonry bowed slightly near the floor. I measured the angle with a small level, adjusted the lower plate, and asked Claire to mark the drill points. She leaned closer to the wall, then tapped the masonry with her pencil. Here? Half an inch higher. She moved it. Here? Perfect. The word left my mouth before I could weigh it. It referred to the drill point. Both of us knew that. The basement still held the extra second. Claire stepped back and wrote the measurement on the margin of the schematic. I set the drill. The bit bit into old brick with a hard, grinding scream. Dust sprayed across the plastic sheet. When the anchor seated, the steel strut held. I recorded the torque reading in my field notebook and photographed the gauge. By midnight, the breach was patched. By 1, the bracing was in place. By 2, my sealed temporary stabilization plan was taped to the basement wall in a clear plastic sleeve, with photographs, measurements, and Code 2A language attached behind it. Claire sat at the drafting table upstairs with both hands around a mug of coffee she had forgotten to drink. No sugar. The bad work version? I placed a single packet beside it anyway. She looked at it and almost smiled. I haven't won yet. No, I said, but the wall stopped leaking. She stirred in the sugar. The spoon sounded tired against the mug. I bought this building 5 years ago, she said. My husband had been gone 8 months. The insurance money covered the down payment, and everyone told me to use it for something easier. A condo, a smaller office, something that didn't need constant repairs. I stayed across the table. No reaching, no interrupting. She looked toward the hallway full of children's paintings. I wanted a place that could hold people without asking them to explain why they were broken when they walked in. The old floorboards settled under us. I closed my field notebook and placed it beside the permit packet. Then we make sure the city has to look at what this place actually is. She nodded once. A real next step, not comfort. A plan. Friday arrived with a hard blue sky and no mercy. Inspector Harris walked in at 9 a.m. carrying a clipboard. Marcus came behind him in a charcoal suit, smiling like a man who had already selected the construction fence. I stood in the main room beside the drafting table. Claire stood beside me, folio in hand, not behind me. Marcus stopped when he saw me. "Nathan," he said, "you missed the waterfront meeting." "The waterfront meeting has 3 deputy planners and a spreadsheet," I said. "This building has an emergency inspection." "You work for Sterling Development." "I did a conflict review. Ms. Morgan's cooperative is a private historical nonprofit defending its own parcel. It is not a competing developer." His smile thinned. "That is a generous interpretation. It is the one my license can defend." Harris cleared his throat. "I need access to the basement." Claire stepped forward before I could speak. "This way," she said. Her voice did not shake. We went down together. Harris examined the wall, the cement patch, the bracing, and the posted schematic. He checked my seal, compared the crack measurements, and reviewed the Code 2A language. Marcus stayed near the stairs. "This is cosmetic," he said. "The macro hold remains in effect." Harris ignored him and tapped the bracing with the back of his flashlight. "The pillars are sound," he said. "This does not support emergency demolition under 4B. Marcus's jaw worked once. "The City Council votes on the overlay next Thursday. The building can be condemned under district rezoning regardless." I opened my briefcase and removed the parcel severance filing. "No," I said, "it can't." Marcus turned. I handed the document to Harris, not him. "The cooperative parcel is listed under historical community use. I filed a severance appeal yesterday at 4:12 p.m. using the registry exemption. Until the administrative review is resolved, the parcel cannot be grouped into the industrial decay average. Without the grouped average, the macro hold cannot apply to this building." Harris read the stamp. Claire watched the inspector's face. The basement was quiet except for the faint hum of the utility light. The emergency orders paused. Harris said, "The building remains open pending full administrative review. Permanent protection will require the preservation charter to be filed into the council record before the hearing." Claire's hand tightened around the folio. "Not fear this time. Readiness." Marcus took one step toward me. "You just cost yourself a board seat." I put the field notebook back into my briefcase. "I'd rather keep my seal." Marcus looked at Claire. "You think this saves you? The city gets tired of people who make process difficult." Claire moved forward, placing herself between Marcus and the wall he had tried to condemn. "No," she said. "The city gets better when people stop letting developers write the process for them." Harris signed the temporary compliance form. The ink looked small for something that heavy. By noon, I had a message from Sterling HR requesting my immediate presence. By 1, Marcus had accepted my resignation before I formally submitted it. By 3, the cooperative board called an emergency meeting in the upstairs classroom. I was not in the room for the vote. I waited in the hallway beside a bulletin board covered in children's drawings of houses with impossible windows and trees larger than roofs. Mr. Alvarez sat on a folding chair nearby, both hands on his cane. "You did a foolish thing," he said. "Yes." "Good." He did not elaborate. I did not ask him to. 10 minutes later, the classroom door opened. Claire stepped out with the board president, a retired public defender named Mara, who had eyes sharp enough to cross-examine a stop sign. Mara handed me a folder. "The board has approved an independent planning contract," she said. "Temporary, pending your own council's review. Paid at a rate that will not bankrupt us but will let me sleep at night." Claire's mouth twitched. Mara negotiated herself down. She said, "It was alarming to watch." "It was efficient," Mara said. I opened the folder. The contract was clean. Limited scope, no dependency, no hidden personal tie, no blurred line. Exactly the way it needed to be. I signed. Claire did not say anything romantic. Neither did I. The work still came first. 6 days later, the city council chamber was packed. The developers sat at the front table with their legal team and glossy renderings of the future district. The renderings showed wide sidewalks, rooftop gardens, medical offices, and public art murals that looked suspiciously like the art already hanging inside the cooperative. Marcus did not look at me when I took a seat in the back row. I was there as the cooperative's approved lead urban planner, contract signed and filed before the hearing began. The ethics line was clean. The board minutes were on record. Mara had insisted on 3 copies. Claire stood near the podium with the worn leather folio held under one arm. She wore the same cream blouse and light blazer from the fountain, but the posture was different now. She was not intercepting anyone. She was claiming floor space. The council clerk called the East Side Arts and Healing Cooperative. Claire stepped up. "The cooperative withdraws its request for temporary variance," she said into the microphone. A ripple moved through the room. Marcus finally looked at her. Claire placed a bound document on the podium. "We are submitting a permanent historical preservation charter, supported by a parcel severance appeal, a Code 2A stabilization record, and the full attendance documentation for our community clinic, youth arts program, and grief counseling services." She opened the folio. The question was never whether our foundation had failed. The question was why the city was rushing a specific eviction based on a code that did not apply. She turned a page. Her hand was steady. "The answer is in the parcel grouping. Sterling Development combined our historical cooperative with condemned industrial parcels to inflate the average decay metric and justify a macro hold. That grouping is improper under the historical registry exemption." Mara handed the clerk a copy of the evidence packet. Harris's temporary compliance form sat on top. My sealed schematic followed. The photographs of the patched leak were labeled, dated, and mapped. Claire continued, "This building does not need demolition. It needs the city to stop using demolition as a shortcut." A council member leaned toward the microphone. "Ms. Morgan, do you have professional support for the preservation charter?" Claire turned toward the back row. "Our lead urban planner is present." That was my cue. Not a rescue. Not a surprise. A public process already approved. I stood, walked down the aisle, and joined her at the podium. The fountain was not here, but I could hear it anyway in the measured rhythm of the room. Paper, breath, microphone hum, paper again. I opened my planner statement. "The original 4B classification is inconsistent with the physical evidence," I said. "The basement breach is localized, repairable, and temporarily stabilized under Code 2A. The parcel severance appeal freezes the industrial overlay until administrative review is complete. The emergency demolition order should be removed from the agenda." Marcus's attorney objected. Mara smiled like she had been waiting all week. The council chair reviewed the packet, conferred with the city attorney, and recessed for 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes stretched. Claire sat beside me in the front row. She did not ask if we had enough. She did not ask what happened if we lost. She took a black pen from her folio and wrote a note on the corner of the agenda. I glanced down. "Your coffee gets 1 sugar after this." I looked at her. She kept her face forward. The smallest pressure valve laugh moved through my chest, quiet enough that only she heard it. When the council returned, the chair adjusted her glasses. "The emergency demolition recommendation is removed from today's vote. The historical preservation charter is accepted into the record pending full review. The cooperative remains open." Claire closed her eyes. Not in collapse, in completion. Marcus gathered his papers with unnecessary force and left before the meeting ended. The developers followed. The chamber doors closed behind them. The work was not finished. Preservation review would take months. The grant application still needed signatures. The basement still needed permanent trenching and drainage repair. But the wrecking ball had lost its calendar. Outside, the late afternoon had turned the courthouse steps gold. Claire and I walked without planning to. The route took us back toward the square fountain where she had stopped me the first day. The water hit the stone with the same steady crash, but this time, it did not sound like something drowning traffic. It sounded like something holding rhythm. Claire stopped beside the basin. The paperwork had been filed. The meeting had adjourned. The contract between the cooperative and me was already approved, witnessed, and separate from whatever stood between us now. She looked at the fountain, then at me. "I've been searching for you so long," she said. The title line landed without performance. No dramatic whisper. No hand pressed to her heart. Just a woman at the edge of a public square saying the truth after the public work was done. I looked at the water-striking stone, then at her folio, worn soft at the corners, then at her. "You found me when the report was wrong," I said. That was business. It was still accurate. She laughed once, and this time it did not break off. I held out my hand, palm up, the way I had at the fountain the first day when I asked for the report. She looked at it, then placed her hand in mine. Her grip was strong. No debt in it. No gratitude she owed me. Only choice. 8 months later, the cooperative smelled like sawdust, wet clay, and coffee. The second-floor renovation had begun 2 weeks earlier. A municipal grant covered the clinic expansion, and the preservation charter had passed its final review after 3 public meetings, 2 legal objections, and 1 memorable morning when Mara made a developer's attorney admit he had not read the historical registry clause he was arguing against. The basement had been permanently repaired with a proper trench and drainage system. The old emergency steel brace remained on the wall, not because it was needed now, but because Claire refused to remove the thing that had helped them survive the inspection. She had hung a small plaque beneath it. "Temporary support, permanent lesson." I told her it was sentimental. She told me I had a field notebook full of crack measurements from a building that was no longer leaking. Fair. That morning, I stood at the drafting table rolling up blueprints for the new community clinic rooms. The front windows spilled light over the scarred floorboards. Downstairs, a contractor tested framing measurements. Upstairs, someone dropped a hammer and apologized to the entire building. Claire walked in carrying 2 mugs. One was my usual white ceramic mug from the kitchenette. The other was a lopsided piece she had fired herself during the appeal weeks, its rim uneven, its glaze pooling darker on one side. It was technically imperfect and functionally excellent. She handed me the lopsided mug. "1 sugar," she said. I looked down into the coffee. "We have not won anything today. The contractor arrived on time. That counts? In city work, punctual contractors count as a civic miracle." I took the mug. It warmed my hand. She leaned over the blueprints and tapped the clinic intake room. I moved the counseling office away from the stairwell. She said, "Sound carries too much there." "You're right." "I know. I made the change on the plan." She smiled, small and satisfied, then set a folder beside the blueprints. "What's that?" "Final permit packet for the clinic expansion," she said. "Mara already reviewed it. The board signed this morning. Your name is on the technical page. Mine is on the ownership page. The cooperative stays first." I opened the folder. The paperwork was clean. The boundary was clean. The future was not a rescue, it was a structure. Outside, the city moved around us. Somewhere blocks away, the square fountain kept hitting stone. Inside, the old foundation held. Claire's name stayed first on the permit, and the lopsided mug kept my coffee warm exactly the way it was supposed to. I picked up my pen and made the final notation on the clinic plan. Not demolition. Repair, not control. Support. You don't tear down the foundation to fix a leak. You protect what is sound, repair what is damaged, and let the building stand. The end.